Good afternoon to everybody and welcome to our workshop. Thank you for attending. This workshop is focused on data-driven innovation, but from the point of view of demand, how to build the data-agile economy from the demand side. And it will focus on the ways in which adoption of innovative technology is evolving and how enterprises are implementing digital transformation. A few words of housekeeping. I'm sorry if you have already heard them many times, but this is necessary. All participants except speakers and moderators will be muted by default. If you're not a speaker, please turn off your video. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box and we'll try to answer. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand, wait for the moderator to give you the floor. And if you have any technical issue, please contact the Zoom host or co-hosts. So the speakers will be, first of all, Marta Batalla-Mazana, a policy officer from DG Grow, who will introduce the Advanced Technologies for Industry project, which is the organizer of today's workshop. Then there will be a series of speeches to set the scene about the scenarios of digital transformation. Myself and Yves Pendaven from DG Connect, head of sector on digitizing European industry governance. Thank you for coming, Yves. Sergio Gusmeroli and Vittorio Monferrino. Sergio from Polimi, Vittorio from GFT. They will present some of the research from projects and activities in task forces from the manufacturing and finance industry, respectively, active in the BDVA. So we'll hear from drivers and evolving situation in these sectors. Then we will have a panel with Sotiris Ioannidis from the Technical University and Dragana Bajovic, Associate Professor, University of Novi Sad, and they will represent respectively the IBIDAS project and the Marvel project. And Chiara Napione from Comau, she will talk about the Musketeer project. So they will share with us some of the lessons learned from the pilots and activities in this project. And you are free to, of course, ask questions. We hope to have enough time for a few questions. And we have also already launched a poll with 2 questions to all of you, and you will see it in our sidebar in the session in WOVA. We have asked you 2 questions. One about the impact of data-driven innovation. In which part of the company, function of the company, do you think that data-driven innovation will have the biggest impact, going from customer satisfaction to improved efficient operations and so on? And the second question is about industries. In which industries there will be more disruption in the next years driven by digital innovation adoption? And we are curious to see what are the results of this poll. We will share the results with you during the panel. So no further observations. I want to give the floor actually to Marta, please. So please, it's up to you now.
Thank you so much, Gabriela, and good afternoon, everyone. As Gabriela was saying, my name is Marta Batalla, and I'm a policy officer at the European Commission, more precisely at DG Grow. And also, I'm one of the project managers of the Advanced Technologies for Industry. The Advanced Technologies for Industry is a monitoring tool that we have at DG Grow that aims to assess the diffusion and the uptake of advanced technologies. And by naming advanced technologies, we have defined a list of 16 advanced technologies divided in 2 sections, one which we call the digital technologies, that can be artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data, and the key enabling technologies, the more physical technologies that can be photonics and electronics and so on. So we have a list of 16 advanced technologies that we monitor by using different sources of data. We're monitoring them over time, and we try to assess what is the level of adoption by every, let's say, sector, industry sector. So we check their adoption of these technologies, and we see how the different industrial sectors can improve their level of competitiveness and the adoption of advanced technologies by this monitoring tool. We also, after having this analysis more in depth on data. We also provide different sources of reports that are linked to products, that are linked to specific sectors, that are linked with the level of competitiveness with other regions in the world. So these are a list of different reports that you can find actually on our website, that for those that you are keen to check about our website is ati.europa.eu. And the last thing that we provide on our ATI project and on our website is a TC mapping, so a technology center mapping, where different technology centers can apply and become members to these technology centers, can interact with different technology centers, and also can support different SMEs to adopt new technologies, because at the end of all, this is the main goal of the Advanced Technologies for Industry, to support businesses, all different sizes, to adopt other advanced technologies and to become more competitive. And actually, on today's discussion, that we will be discussing about digital transformation and the usage and the importance of data, we do have one of our reports that specifically talks about this. And again, I very much encourage all of you to check this report and the other reports that we have there, as well as all the data that we can provide, because we believe that for policymakers, for academia, and also for different business intermediaries is very much useful. Without further ado, I just very much welcome all of you here. You will have on the link on the chat the link for the ATI project, and I just encourage you to send us questions, to participate just as much as you can, and to enjoy the session of today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you very much. And now it will be me again. Here we are. Just a second. So I also don't want to take too much time, because I want you to be able to have time to listen to our speakers, who are all extremely interesting. What I want to do to say a few words about the scenario of digital transformation as we have analyzed it through the Advanced Technologies for Industry projects, but also about what is changing in the overall world of enterprises because of especially the COVID pandemic. So the world has changed, and I think none was more surprised than also the companies who were, yes, thinking about digital transformation, but not really focusing on it too much. And instead, they had very quickly to establish remote working, online presence, digital services, which became necessary in order to continue operations during the lockdowns of the pandemic. So for those organizations who were not already aware, the pandemic has been a wake-up call showing the benefits of digital transformation, and this is not going to go away. Another important reason of the new urgency of digital transformation has to do with resiliency, the capability to resist and adapt to emergency situations. A majority of EU organizations found out during the pandemic crisis that they were not sufficiently prepared to deal with it. And one reason is that before COVID-19, business and IT resiliency were actually quite two separate approaches, and with a quite operational focus on activities such as, defending your data centers from fire or violations. Today, organizations are merging these two approaches, aiming for a digital resiliency strategy. And I'm saying this because this is becoming a kind of frame in which many companies think about their digital investments. How we define digital resiliency is the ability for an organization to rapidly adapt to business disruptions by leveraging digital capabilities, but not only to restore business operations, also to capitalize on change conditions. And in the new normal after COVID, this means a number of investments and activities. We in IDC, we have developed a framework and measurement approach to benchmark maturity and company capability for digital resiliency, according to the main dimensions of company activity, from leadership to operations and finance. But what I want to underline is that we are seeing a lot of attention and investment in three areas which existed before but were less priority. And the first is about building trust and confidence in the company. And we know how much we talk about trust, confidence, and how they impact the brand name of the company and the trust by customers and suppliers, about changing the workforce, new ways of working as well as skills, and developing the customer ecosystem. So these are trends which are here to stay, and all areas where only the smart use of advanced technologies in combination is the key for success. As Mark anticipated in our ATI project, we look at 16 advanced technologies. Some of them are more horizontal technologies of general purpose, and they support the overall digitization process. And as you can see, it's of course AI, big data, connectivity, cloud. Others are more focused on some industries, advanced manufacturing technology, or are more niche or product related, advanced materials, industrial biotechnologies. But all of them are important in order to allow digital innovation. In our last survey, which was carried out at the end of 2020, so already in the full period of crisis, we have these results. We see that there is a group of technologies which are the basis of digital transformation, which are adopted by the majority of the enterprises surveyed, over 60% uptake level, and these include connectivity, cloud, also advanced manufacturing, security. Then there is a group of technologies which are adopted by a share of companies between 30 and 60%, which includes mobility, big data, and IoT. So these are not quite mature, but very close to maturity. And finally, there is, of course, AI and robotics, which are almost horizontal technologies, which are especially AI, and they are still under 30% on average, but growing very fast. And other technologies are under this, but as we said, more focused on specific sectors in many cases. A very important concept is that companies are adopting more than one technology. It's a combination of technologies, which is the leverage for success. And on average, 78% of our respondents adopt between 2 and 5 technologies. And the technologies more likely to be implemented together are cloud and security solutions. From the point of view of application solutions, it's big data, IoT, and AI. From the point of view of adoption, looking more closely between actual usage, which is the blue bar, and planned use, which is the orange bar, you can see that all technologies see a foreseen increase of adoption, with, of course, the emerging technologies with a perspective of very fast growth, particularly AI and IoT. We can see also a quite fast growth perspective for industrial digital platforms, robotics, and also artificial reality, virtual reality. If we compare, but it's important to look at the impact of the COVID pandemic, compared to the plans in 2019, which is the orange line, and the actual adoption in 2020, you can see for some cases there was a stop. Some of the plans of adoption were not actually respected. And this was happening particularly in the case, for example, of AI, where there were very ambitious plans, but they were not respected. But at the same time, you can see that even the technologies less adopted have seen growth and are probably going to grow fast, particularly as you can see the ones in the lower part of the chart. A very interesting point is the growth of industrial digital platforms, because the increasing need for collaboration between colleagues, peers, and employees is reflected in the market. And we know that this is a key point for this entire conference, because one of our focus is about interoperability and data sharing. Looking at different industries, you can see that in this chart, on the horizontal bar, you see the name of sectors, on the vertical bar, the name of technologies, and the darker the color, the highest the uptake. So what you can see is that there are some technologies, as we said, the basic technologies, which are adopted by most sectors, while others are stronger in some sectors, as you can see, for example, robotics in manufacturing. But what is interesting in others, for example, in healthcare, which has some strong adoption of AI, more than, sorry, I didn't want to move so fast. So this is the basic picture. You can see how varies the adoption by industry. If you look more closely at artificial intelligence, which is one of the key interesting points for us, the leading sectors for adoption are discrete manufacturing, telecom, media, finance, and healthcare. In the case of manufacturing, AI is being used to support end-to-end value chain and implement data-driven processes in factories. And interestingly, healthcare is gaining momentum versus other sectors. Why? We have seen during the COVID pandemic how digital technologies were absolutely necessary in order to manage the pandemic, and with the coming back of the concept of public health management and so on, this has given a premium on the ability to use IT and other technologies such as AI to help solve this kind of problems. Now, this is quite interesting. We have asked enterprises how they found themselves compared to the return to growth. So if they were still struggling in a recession or economic slowdown situation, or managing business continuity, already in a return to growth, or able to deal with the next normal. So you can see in the red bars and orange bars is the area of companies still struggling. And as you can see, there are many of them, particularly in the sectors on the top of the list, for example, agriculture. While the sectors with the biggest green bars are the ones which are already improving and managing better. So as you can see, healthcare is the sector where there is the strongest ability to return to normal, as we have discussed. Telecom and media is also showing above average percentage of firms able to keep their business running. Again, we know that the demand of connectivity was a very strong driver during this past period. But also manufacturing, interestingly, was able to preserve, many companies were able to preserve the resiliency of the supply chain and of production. But this means that companies have, in the new normal, if we look again at the future and trends, we see that there has been a change of mentality. And here are 3 quotations from leading companies which witness this kind of change of mentality, which will affect how digital transformation and adoption of technologies is evolving. In the education sector, the CIO recognizes how the massive digital transformation plans they had have now been accelerated strongly. A CIO from the arts, entertainment, and recreation sector, which has been extremely strongly hit by the pandemic, recognizes how they need to compete differently and reprioritize their investments. And finally, in the utilities sector, a CIO says that they are getting less pushback. I mean, there has been a recognition that there is a need for dramatic and disruptive innovation, and compared to the past, there are less obstacles to understanding the reasons why. In this context, I want to close only with a few words about 3 main trends that we see emerging, that IDC sees emerging from enterprises, and again affects demand. The first one is about carbon friendly, so how to reduce carbon emissions. We see a high number of companies investing in technologies in order to improve the management of carbon emissions and reduce them in order to support sustainability objectives. Then about building a resilient workforce, but not only to enable diversity and equivalence. This is not so much tied to the pandemic, but is a general trend of social awareness and request of greater diversity in the workplace. And we see technologies to be used in order to help to enable a better workforce. And finally, how you can use AI to adapt to what is called the VUCA economy: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. To be honest, I think this is a horrible acronym, but I guess the concepts are horrible as well. But we expect that not only that companies already are using AI and machine learning to deal with automation in order to improve resilience, particularly, for example, for customer experience, but we also see many enterprises investing in adaptive operations, leveraging AI. So this is the kind of general context and scenarios that we see for digital transformation. And I'm happy now, thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy now to give the floor to Yves Pendaven for further understanding of what is going on in the marketplace and what are the main policies in this area. Thank you, Yves, up to you.
Many thanks, Gabriela, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in this Data Week, in the ATI session of the Data Week. Maybe I will just talk a bit of, if this thing lets me, okay, no. If we want to put it back into perspective about digital, we could actually, as a joke, say, well, digital is all about data, almost, in the sense that we see really an increasing wealth of data. This wealth of data, you probably have heard that the projection by 2025 would be that we would get to 175 zettabytes of data that we would have to manage. 175 zettabytes, well, maybe that doesn't tell you anything. This is 10 power 21. And if 1 byte was a grain of rice, you could actually fill the whole Pacific Ocean with 1 zettabyte. So just to give a bit of the perspective, that's what we are now talking about. If you look at all the digital technologies, you heard Gabriela mention artificial intelligence, industrial platform. Well, artificial intelligence is actually using data to be built. It's also consuming data in order to give some inference on what is the best optimization or the best decision then next to be taken. We can hear now of further advance in terms of digital technologies, such as digital twins. So this is a virtualization of a physical asset, which allows you to optimize your use of resources, or even the design time of a production line, for example. And a digital twin is nothing but a model which consumes data and which produces data as well. So what we want to now make sure is that European industry takes everything out of the industrial data. That is, we don't let this strength in Europe to go away. We really want, by building data spaces, so industrial data B2B platform, so that our manufacturing industry could actually share and reuse data. And there is another trend which you probably already have seen. More and more people were just sending their data onto a centralized cloud somewhere and having it processed from there. And more with the computing power, we are now able to have the computing, the handling of the data at the point of creation. And this is called edge computing. And we see, if today 80% of the data is managed in the cloud, the prediction is that trend would reverse, so that by 2025, we get to 80% being managed at the edge, that is close to the machine where it is produced. And a number of digital technologies are actually converging to make this possible, be it the connectivity, be it the analytics, the power of computing. So you really get these data really where it matters, allowing for a real-time handling of the machine and of the production. Now, if we put ourselves, if you are a data producer and you think of or a data supplier, where are the biggest obstacles? Well, the first obstacle for me as a supplier is which kind of infrastructure do I need to have in place? So if we want to build a data economy, we need to have an interoperable infrastructure in place. And this is what the suppliers have found as the biggest hurdle. The next one here is the legal aspect, which is who is really responsible for the data and what can be done with this data. But if you are now a consumer of that data, what would be the obstacle for you to reuse them? And again, this study has shown that the biggest obstacle is data availability, is what now people fear, that they would be denied access either to their own data or to data of others. And the second biggest fear is actually unfair condition. So if we want to have a data economy, these are the kind of obstacles that we need to tackle. And this is why we came up last year in one of the program, or the Digital Europe program. This is why we came with common European data spaces, which are in fact an infrastructure, which are technical tools for the data pooling, for the data sharing, with an implementation roadmap. And they are at the same time a data sharing governance. So they are all of it, not just one specific aspect, but all of it. And to start with, we will be willing to look into 9 data spaces, that is in data spaces in 9 sectors, for a total amount of 200 million for the first 2 years. And this is, in fact, now what we want to have industry and the manufacturing industry more specifically to do the most of its own data, so that they can really share it and then they can fully understand where the data is going, think of compensation mechanism between them. If I move on to show a bit the kind of architecture that we are thinking of, and you see from bottom to top, this comes with even more value added in terms of manufacturing services. So we have the commodity, which is the infrastructure, the computing and storage infrastructure at the bottom. And as we move on, we find a data space which defines how to share data between companies. And on top of this would live a number of application and services, which makes use of this data sharing so that we can also create new business models. That is, business models based on the sharing of data, the reuse of that data. We are thinking also to make sure that everyone can benefit from this. So in the same program, we have also launched a transfer and uptake initiative, which are the European Digital Innovation Hub. And really, this is how, in fact, you see the different things, how they are mapping. And for people to be able to either test their solution or to see as a technology window what makes it interesting for them to acquire in terms of digital technologies, we will also have testing and experimentation facilities. We have thought, if I now really focus on one specific aspect, that is the manufacturing data space, you see that we are focusing on 2 scenarios. And one scenario would be with many different stakeholders along supply chains with one data space. And that supply chain would be mirrored in the digital space, and it would create digital assets. And another scenario which we are looking at is also how do we manage assets? And typically, this would be how you have a machine providing a number of data once installed on a production line, and you have a third party providing services of integration first, and second, helping to provide an optimization as we go along. So it means here it's really access to the deep industrial data in a production line with fewer stakeholders than in the previous examples. And that is the condition monitoring here is not without interest, as you could probably know that Gaia X has also chosen this specific scenario as one of their use cases. As I mentioned, all of this will enable to experience with digital twins of products, the car as a product, but even the robot as a product, or even the full cycle. So that would be the idea here, to model everything. That would also enables for smart contract, for artificial intelligence to get to play. Another part where if we want to have a data economy to be put in place, there is a need for an availability of high-value data sets. And this is also something that we are going to release, especially in a number of domains, be it the statistical domain, the meteorological, the weather forecast domain, etc. Just a few words.
I'm very sorry, but can you wrap up?
Okay.
I'm sorry, but we have many speakers and not much.
Yeah, sure. So just very quickly, a funding program, the Digital Europe program, 7 billion, where we are going to invest into data. We still have the Horizon Europe, which is for the supply of core digital technologies, which will be reusing actually data and which will develop the technologies to exploit data even more. And if I jump to the digital decade, this is an initiative that we launched for the next 10 years on how we want to roll out now a number of digitalization of businesses. One of the targets is to get to 75% of companies using big data. Just to note, we are currently at 14%. So this is the lowest of all that we are. We have also another number of targets that we want here to achieve. But I can skip this now safely. And the last slide that I wanted to say is, it's not only about technology. We also need to make sure that we have a level playing field for all companies to really operate safely in a legal and regulatory environment. And we have already two key instruments which have been adopted: a Data Governance Act to really ensure the trust in the data transaction, a Digital Market Act to regulate when we have dominance and market power for data, and still two more to come. One is high-value data sets, as I mentioned before, which kind of public sector data of high value could be set, and a Data Act to actually provide the rules and a level playing fields on the rules of how data can be shared among different actors of the data economy. And with this, I close. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Yves. And I think anybody with questions, please put them in the chat. And I give the floor to Sergio Gusmeroli from Polimi, who will speak about the manufacturing industry.
Sergio, you're in mute.
Please unmute yourself, Sergio.
You're still muted.
On the left corner. Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Sergio.
Very sorry. So this is Sergio Gusmeroli. I'm a research coordinator at Politecnico Milano. And I wish to give you some overview about initiatives, mostly projects, Horizon 2020 projects, which are dealing with the data spaces for manufacturing. And in particular, from the demand side, that is the side of the manufacturing industry. And this collection of viewpoints is one of the activities of a subgroup in the BDVA DAIRO, which is the Smart Manufacturing Industry Group. I'm co-chairing together with Davide Dalle Carbonare. First of all, as also Yves Pandeven said, what do we mean by data space? And I wish to underline the fact that there are three bullets, which are in yellow, which are of high importance in order to realize a data space, and in particular a data space for manufacturing. So high value pools of data is okay, but also fair, that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. As Yves Pandeven said, the obstacles encountered data providers and by data consumers are very high if we don't put in place at the level of metadata, because the point is the game is played at the level of metadata, open standards, open metadata, and ontologies and shared ontologies in order to have a full, fair aspect when you publish some data sets. Second, infrastructure to use and exchange data. And you know, there are several initiatives. One of them is the initiative which is represented in this picture, the International Data Spaces Association, and their reference architectural model. But most important is to find appropriate business and governance models and mechanisms. And this is characterizing mostly the manufacturing industry with respect to the other industries. First project, which is relevant in this perspective, is the OpenDI, Coordination and Support Action. Inside the OpenDI, Coordination and Support Action, we developed a white paper, Design Principles for Data Spaces, where we put in evidence which are the main activities that from a provider side, we should do in order to build a data space. Interoperability, trust, data value, and governance. Inside the BDVA, we also addressed it from the demand side, from the user perspective. And in the document, which is in the position paper, which is shown on the left-hand side, we identified the so-called data sharing value wheel, where in order to really have a full adoption of data sharing in the end users, we needed to address governance, people, organization, technologies, data in an environment which is trust. Now I come to the manufacturing sector, and this is a graphic from Capgemini about a data-empowered enterprise. And so, how is your enterprise basing their decisions on the basis of data? And you will see that my colleague Vittorio, which is going to follow me, is very happy because banking, insurance are at the very top position, 65% and 55%. Manufacturing is quite lagging behind. This means that there is a very huge potential, market potential for manufacturing in order to recover this gap. But as a matter of fact, we need, for instance, cases. We need the success stories. We need best practices. This is what we are doing in another CSA, which is called Connected Factories. And in Connected Factories, we are developing this schema, which is called the Pathway, which will help enterprises to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 till the full adoption of the value of data which has to be shared. And we are asking projects, basically projects, to populate the EFRA innovation portal with this information. And this will be very, very important for manufacturing enterprises to have some reference success stories, some best practices to follow. From a more scientific viewpoint, which is the data transformation, how to go from data laggards to data masters. You see that this is again the study from Capgemini, and you see that in the x-axis you have the technological stuff, in the y-axis you have the non-technological stuff, people, processes, skills, and culture. And the point is that it is quite straightforward that in order to go from data laggards to data masters, you need to consider both. You need to consider both the technology and the data behaviors and people, processes, skills. And so it is almost not feasible or not useful to first adopt the technology and then try to change the mindset, or first to change the mindset and then adopt the technology. The two needs to be done simultaneously, and this is what we are doing in the AI Regio project I'm the coordinator of, where we are developing this digital transformation action plan method, which is called 6P, where we analyze the impact of data technologies, in general of digital technologies, on the products, on the process, and on the IT platform of the enterprise. And this is covering the technical stuff, the x-axis in the previous diagram, and the people, partnership, and performance. Partnership means that many times manufacturing enterprises need to go into partnership with other organizations. For instance, digital innovation hubs, competence centers. And then performance. We need a new set of KPIs in order to measure how a manufacturing company is ready in order to fully adopt and exploit the potential of data economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sergio. This was really interesting. So I'm happy to give the floor to Vittorio. Let's see how the finance industry can compete with this kind of view.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Sorry,
I hope you can see. Yeah.
I muted myself. Yes, we can see this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gabriella. Hello, everyone. My name is Vittorio Monferrino, and I am a project manager of GFT and task force leader of the task force named AI and Big Data for the Financial Services that is part of BDVA DAIRO. Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what the financial sector is in the content of data-driven innovation and digital transformation, also building upon on what Gabriella showed and also what Sergio showed. Okay, first of all, a very quick overview, quite aligned with what Gabriella said at the beginning. In a study made from Accenture here in the one of the most interesting findings from my point of view, you can see how before pandemic and after pandemic, the more than 10,000 companies that have been surveyed are going to shift their expenses, their IT budget, and they're going to increase quite consistently the budget in the innovation side. And that, as you can imagine, will have a huge impact. Another quite interesting finding that is also connected to the initial graphs showed by Gabriella is that overall all the companies that has been surveyed are going to increase by a lot their adoption of technologies, and almost all are going to break the barrier of the 90%. So how the financial sector is positioning there? By the way, I was quite happy indeed to see that in the slide of Sergio, that banking and insurance were at the first places for data-driven decisions. And you can see here that in another study made from Deloitte, whereas only financial services and financial industries were interviewed, you see the differences and how all these companies are going to implement new technologies. You see there the blue line is related to what the companies implemented 2 years ago. The line in the middle to what they are implementing today, and the line on the right to what they're going to implement. As you can see, there are positive trends overall, and almost all are going to implement 6 technologies out of the all that are there. The tools that I would like to focus on are advanced analytics and AI and machine learning. And indeed, those are the ones in which the financial sector is increasing its impact and its interest, and that also related to the willingness of the financial sector to increase their data-driven decisions. Indeed, in another study, 89% of the respondents said that they are working to improve their data literacy, and that's a clear pattern to show that the future of the financial sector is driven by data-driven decisions. Okay, so before giving you some data, some numbers about the trends, I would like to mention very briefly the main challenges that are related to the adoption of innovation and new technologies in the financial sector. Some of them, of course, are shared by all the different sectors that has been represented today. For example, we have data fragmentation, data availability barriers, a lack of validated business models, the impact that the new technologies are having on banking business models, and last but not least, the regulatory barriers. Indeed, especially in the financial sector, because of the several regulations that are sector-specific, such as the PSD2 or the MiFID, those are putting a lot of entry barriers and a lot of issues in adopting new technologies. So here you can see some data on the global market on the financial services and the differences and the increases that there have been in the last years, and that there will be as forecasts. And that is one of the main consequences of the boost in the digital transformation adoption that is, let's say, that has been forced by the COVID pandemic. You see there the global market in $1 billion, that is quite huge. And the orange columns are the ones related to the fintech sector. That, as you can see, it's quite small compared to the financial services, because it counts for 0.5% a couple of years ago, and it is expected to increase to almost 1% in 2030. Still, even though compared seems quite small, it is not small at all, because as you can see, for example, the fintech sector in 2030 is expected to rise to $325 billion. That is quite a lot. And also in relation to one of the 3 main trends that Gabriela mentioned at the beginning, so building trust in the customers, that's actually one of the main issues in the financial sector, as shared also by others, because of the large amount of sensitive data that they have to handle, and because of the security measures that has to be implemented. And that's one of the main reasons why, of course, the regulatory barriers are one of the biggest challenges in implementing innovation in the fintech sector. A very quick example of that is one from the 2017, whereas Equifax, that is a fintech company, has been breached, and more than 140 million sensible data from customers has been accessed. Okay, so I would like to focus now a bit on the trends of the fintech sector, having compared that with the financial services, because the biggest part of innovation can be found actually in fintech. And here you see a very accurate study from a business research company, whereas the fintech sector and the fintech trends are split per services. You see them from 2015 to 2030. There are 2 main data I would like to highlight. The first one is that till 2019, the insurance market, so the insurance services, were the biggest portion of the overall fintech trends, accounting for almost 50%. So as you can see there, $55 billion in the fintech industry. The other very important trend that, of course, is a forecast, but it's quite accurate, as I was saying at the beginning, is that in the coming years, especially till 2030, the proportions are changing. The insurance market is declining a bit, and the market that is gaining more pace and more advantage on the others is the fund transfer. Just to give you some example, on one hand, it can be considered PayPal, a fund transfer company, or TransferWise. And that's the sector that is more prominent in the coming years. Again, another quick graph, also about the fintech trends, but this time split per region. You see that in the previous years, the proportions were quite stable, consistently stable, even though the market was increasing. But it is expected that in the coming years, the Asia and Pacific and all the Europe markets are going to increase quite a lot, whereas America is going to lose its advantages. And that's a promising trend from our side. Then I would like to conclude with this last slide. As I was saying at the beginning, we are leading in GFT. I am the co-leader, a task force that is called AI and Big Data for the Financial Sector, whereas some of the data that you found here in my presentation today are included. And we are working almost since 1 year and a half in these activities. And one of the main objectives of this task force is to write a white paper. You see here the compacted table of content, whereas the working group from BDVA and the working group from Fintech, that is a flagship project in the digital finance sector, have worked a lot in order to extract some relevant data. The main objective of this white paper is to provide a perspective from the research side and another perspective from the market side, and to bridge those gaps, while being aligned with the digital strategy from the European Commission and the strategic research innovation agenda from BDVA. Last comment on it is that apart from the several contents that you will find there, a very interesting section is related to the collection of use cases. That is one of the annexes, whereas we gathered and collected 15 different use cases from the communities. And from those, we extracted some conclusions and recommendations in order to provide an overview of the challenges that has been already faced from stakeholders and how those stakeholders have overcome those challenges. The paper is currently under review and will be published hopefully around June or something like that. And that's all. Thank you for the attention. And I give you the floor again, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Vittorio. I think this was extremely interesting, and you anticipated. I just wanted to. I had a curiosity about the role of AI in this in this evolution of the fintech industry, and I think you started to answer that it's playing a very important part from what I hear. So I think we have finished. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I was happy to have anticipated something. Indeed, AI is playing a quite huge, important role in the financial services industry.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time now, but I think we are a bit 5 minutes or so over our timetable, but we can now move to the second part of this workshop, which is a panel, as we said before, where we will hear from 3 participants to key projects. And our focus is about the lessons learned from this project. But I want to ask to all of them, Sotiris, Dragan, and Chiara, the main question is, how did your project research address the data challenges that we have heard about, and especially how do you see the results of your research affecting demand trends? So if you can tell us something about this. So may I ask this first to Sotiris? Sotiris, do you want to?
Sure. Hi, Gabriela. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Sotiris Ioannidis. I'm an associate professor at the Technical University of Crete and also an affiliated researcher with Forth. To try to answer the question that you posed, let me give you a bit of background on what we try to accomplish in the IBIDAS project, which ended a few months ago, and what were the challenges that we faced and why we think that these were actually worthy challenges to be addressed. So IBIDAS, or Industrial Driven Big Data as a Self-Service Solution, basically try to provide a flexible solution so that both experts and non-experts can interact with big data. And the way we went about to accomplish this is create 3 different modes of operation in a system to help these users. The first mode of operation is what we call the self-service mode of operation for non-experts. And here, when we say non-experts, we don't mean someone that has no idea about what a computer is or what data is. We're talking about people that are computer literate, they understand data, but it's just that they don't have a master's or a doctorate in big data analytics. To overcome the challenge of having such people work with big data, we developed a system for them. And we have other modes, of course, for experts that can exploit much more of the functionality of the tools. And we also understood that often companies want to train personnel and train big groups, or may have problems that they cannot address internally. So we also went into developing another mode where you can bring in experts and work with people within the company using our system to train them and solve real problems. So this was the first step to address the challenges. The first thing that we encounter, of course, is not really the technological aspect. It's not like, we're scientists who can build new tools. But the main problem, the main challenge was actually getting the data. Yes, we went into this project with some commitments from partners, but the initial commitments were very poor, let's say. So it was a big challenge for us to convince not the researchers that were coming from these big companies, they understood the value, but convince the companies themselves that there is value to be gained by opening up data and having scientists experiment and create new tools and give feedback. So that was the primary challenge. And I'm happy to say that we started this project with how many data sets we had? I think we had like 10 data sets, and most of them were synthetic and closed. And we ended up giving 12 data sets. 8 of them were actually real data sets and for synthetic, and 9 of them were actually able to do to make them open source, open access for the entire community. So first challenge was the technology, but that we can address. Second challenge was actually getting the data and opening them up. The third thing was that we wanted to disseminate these achievements and the value of opening the data to not just the people that were in the consortium and were doing the work, but the company as a whole. So we promoted these success cases of the pilot providers of our project to the broader community, and we hope we did a fairly good job there, and hopefully we're going to convince others. I think it's going to be, it's going a good way, because we had a startup company from the project, so it means that all acceptance. There were some of the innovations were adopted by the Innovation Radar, so there is impact out there. So with these success stories, we believe that others are going to feel more at ease when sharing data with others. So yes, there are technological solutions, but I think the most important thing is actually breaking the silos and opening things up, and everyone's going to gain at the end. So with this, I want to put a full stop because I don't want to monopolize the time.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting, but it seems like you spent 3 years working with people in order to change their minds. So do you think it can be done a bit faster? There can be a cumulative impact on mindsets, let's say,
So
if there are more examples.
So we didn't spend 3 years convincing people. Yes, we spent some time initially convincing people, and then it actually became this avalanche. So once people within the organization, management and legal were convinced, it was easier to open more and more data and make them from synthetic, turn them into actual data. So it was an ongoing process. And I think via the hackathons that we did, where people came in from other companies, from universities, and went into our industrial partners and played with this data. These are good steps to showcase to the entire industry that opening up is actually a good thing. And I think more and more companies are going to do this. And we have seen this in the past as well. The company that comes to mind is actually Symantec, that they had such a program. And I think Facebook and Twitter have other programs to sharing data. So we are seeing this gaining momentum, and more companies opening up.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's interesting because if it's inertia, the barrier, then in a way it's a bit easier, because as soon as you start momentum, then things can accelerate. I
Absolutely.
want to ask, thank you. I want to ask Dragana Bajovic, and really apologies because I'm sure the way I pronounce your name is wrong, but put up with me. And to talk about the Marvel project, which is about smart cities and the use of data analytics. So I'm curious to hear what were your experiences and what did you learn about how to make people use data better? Thank you.
Hi, Gabriela. Hi, everyone. You actually pronounced perfectly my name. Thank you so much. Project Marvel has actually just started this January, so we don't have much home away messages and best practices to share, but we do have some very interesting project objectives that might have impact for data-driven innovation. Marvel is about multi-modal extreme scale analytics for smart cities. And there are several project pillars that we are, let's say, working on in Marvel. One of them is, of course, the data, the very large scale heterogeneous data sources coming from cameras and microphones in smart cities, citywide deployments of all these devices, drones, also geolocation data, and so on. So the issue here, the challenge here is how to fuse this data, and moreover, how to fuse the data in synchronous manner in order to achieve the most value out of this data. A very specific challenge is, and kind of orthogonal to the previous one, is how to do it while respecting privacy of individuals. Because of course, we have use cases in smart cities, which are traffic monitoring, where you can see license plates, you can see people in their vehicles. We have city safety use cases where we are monitoring crowds in public squares. And so we want to achieve real-time insights and situational awareness of what is going on in the cities, if there is some safety critical situations or some abnormal behavior happening, but without compromising privacy of individuals. And for this, we have a set of tools how to address, a set of envisioned tools, of course. One of them is analytics at the edge, which is one very important concept in Marvel. There are other edge-based concepts that we are going to explore. The second pillar of the project is multimodality, the multimodal analytics and AI, which is reflected in the fact that we have different streams of data coming from cameras and streams from microphones, but we want to kind of align them in time to be synchronous and to process them synchronously, similar to how human senses are working. So this is early fusion approach as opposed to late fusion approach, where you combine two separate modalities very late, and perhaps you lose some of the performance. Here we will have some advanced visualization techniques like attention maps, multimodal summaries, and also we will have multimodal representations of data, which we are hoping to increase a lot of accuracy of our models, because we are going to again synchronously fuse the data. And you know, if you have two separate data sources and both of them are noisy, one of them might be very noisy, one of them might have occlusions, for example, in video, might be low visibility conditions, maybe then audio can help to complement the information and to achieve this awareness of situation in the scene that is being monitored. The third pillar of the project is continuous edge for cloud computing. This refers to computing at all possible nodes of the architecture. So there are these large-scale distributed data sources, but also some of them can serve as computation points. There are sources, there are points in the architecture which serve as communication relays like IoT gateways, and they can also serve as a computation point. So the idea in Marvel is to exploit all these distributed architecture to achieve seamless processing of large scale of data. One specific challenge here is to do it as much as possible on the edge. This was mentioned earlier in the session, and we are going to have several edge-based processing. One of them is anonymization at the edge, where only the features from the recorded scenes will be extracted. So, for example, if you're looking at my face, it's not relevant that to identify myself, but to identify, for example, the emotion, maybe fear, to raise an alarm if needed. So in that sense, only the features of the face will be extracted and sent to the cloud without revealing personal information, my specific face features. So so one of the technologies that we're going to develop within the project is to replace a face with I don't know, an avatar or just some different person's face. So edge-based security is also one of the core topics in the project, with secure enclaves within hardware nodes. GPU processing at the edge with very fast and accurate pattern matching, federated learning at the edge. But also, if we look at the whole architecture, from the whole architecture viewpoint, we need to be very efficient in terms of orchestration. And one specific challenge that we have here is how to deploy all these AI tasks and services and deep learning models across this computing continuum in order to achieve really fast insights as early as possible in the architecture, and to do it optimally in an optimized way. And of course, you can do lots of things here. You can break the deep learning models. You can separate them. You can place them in different nodes on this network. You can move the data around to serve the AI tasks as best as possible. One important thing within these pillars is Marvel data corpus. So we are planning to apply the anonymization techniques to collect lots of data, but also apply anonymization techniques on top of this data, and to share Marvel data corpus of audiovisual data from smart cities to enable further innovation in this domain of audiovisual analytics.
Thank you, Dragana. I wanted to ask, did you have difficulty in recruiting, if you want, smart cities for this project, or how was the reaction of smart cities to this kind of suggestion and research?
Yes, so I think we have two municipalities. Actually, one is in Trento, city of Trento. The other is in Malta. And they're very exciting to deploy the use cases and deploy Marvel framework. But there are, of course, issues with data, because there are all these legal frameworks which kind of prevent easy analytics, the GDPR, of course, but there are also local restrictions. For example, we realized that in Italy, there are restrictions about audio data and placing microphones in public squares, for example. So this is one of the obstacles. So there are many obstacles, but we are trying to find ways to overcome these obstacles. So the use case providers are very excited, because there might be huge impact on their operation. Just to give an illustration, for example, in Trento, we have lots of cameras, and all these cameras are fed into one operations room. There are several people in the room, sometimes just one person. that has to process all these streams. So of course, this is impossible. So what we are planning to do, we're planning to put this AI system in the back, which is processing the streams, of course, autonomously, and trying to discover, oh, is there an anomaly here? If there is an anomaly, for example, picked up by some microphone, to just extract, so to take out the stream for this particular camera and maybe put a bounding box around the place in the scene where the anomaly occurred. So this would make it much easier for the municipality, to efficiently monitor the public spaces.
Thank you. This sounds like a very interesting experiment, and I would love to see the results when you will be done. So now I want to ask Chiara Napione from Comau to talk about the Musketeer project, which is a very nice name. I mean, one for all and all for one, right?
Yes,
but it's
right.
about data, of course. So
yes.
Please tell us what you are doing and how do you think this could help for demand and uptake of innovation? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to everybody. As you said, I work in Comau, which is a company focused on industrial automation, and it is a partner of Musketeer project. So now I give you an overview of this project. This is strictly related to AI and data-driven innovation. In fact, its mission is to alleviate data sharing barriers by providing a secure, scalable, and privacy-preserving platform centered on machine learning analytics over a decentralized dataset network. In particular, the aim is to create a scalable platform able to run machine learning models in a federated mode and able to preserve data privacy, and it has to be efficient enough to be deployed in real-world context. For those of you who don't know what it means, federated machine learning, I briefly explain because it is the core of our project. It means that we can train a model with distributed data sets. That means that there are different participants, imagine different places in the world, like different companies, that can make their data available in order to train a more accurate and robust algorithm. And very important, this does not mean that they share their data, because the platform is implemented in order to share only models' coefficients, and the company's data never leaves the facilities, so also the privacy is totally preserved. And finally, we obtain a more robust and accurate model because it has been trained on everyone's dataset. And then each participant can use this better model. So they all take advantage of the federation without sharing data and completely protecting their know-how. Another important aspect is that they can also trust about this model, because we have some partners working on avoiding malicious attacks from companies that, for example, tries to manipulate the shared data to influence the predictive model in order to achieve some particular or tendentious objective. Now, talking about our main lesson learned. First of all, we learned that the industrial sector is very fearful about sharing their data because they rightly want to protect their trade secrets. And this topic is also has been raised with Sotiris before. And this is the biggest challenge, I think. It is important to well explain them how this platform works, how you are able to assure them that data won't leave their facilities. And I think that with the time, they will become more open. Then we discovered that in the plants, there is a huge amount of data coming from the machines, but nowadays it is not properly used. In particular, it contains a big value and it has a very high potentiality, but it is not exploited in the correct way. So we expect that this data-driven innovation will bring a very big added value. And finally, we discovered that in the industrial sector, there are limited fault data on one side because of preventive maintenance, because we have a low quantity of fault in this way. And on the other side, because there is not the culture of labeling fault data. So if you have a fault, you are not used to collect the data and write in a folder, these are data of a fault. And this underlines the importance of a machine learning that is federated, because we can benefit from a major quantity of data that there isn't in a single plant.
Very interesting. So you mean that with machine learning it's possible to learn from data about faults and misworkings in a more automated way so that it can be exploited?
Yes, sure. You can also take advantage of the different environmental conditions. For example, if you have a plant in a cold country, you can have different faults respect to a hot country. And so in this way, you can collect those data and use and take the knowledge and exploit it all over the world in other plants, for example.
So this can lay the basis for digital twins, basically,
yes.
Because we discussed digital twins with in another situation with other case studies, and one of the main problems was exactly collect sufficient data from the start, from past experiences, in order to have more understanding of what could work and not work.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Chiara. I think we've been going very well. We have basically respected the schedule, but I'd like now to share with you all the results of the poll and ask and do a round table of our speakers. Alessandra can show us. So I think this is particularly interesting, and in a moment I will ask our speakers if they agree. We asked, where do you expect data-driven innovation to have the biggest impact on businesses? So it's about benefits. And as you can see, most people answered about more efficiency, so operations cost optimization. And a far second is improved customer satisfaction, while expanding market share and time to market, very few answers. And nobody said that it will improve workforce satisfaction. This is quite interesting. And the next question, Alessandra, can you show? All right, we were asking what are the sectors where there will be more disruptive innovation? And you can see that healthcare is number one, followed by energy and manufacturing, and government, and professional services, the last one. Well, we did hear from our analysis that the professional services were one of the sectors where digital investment went down the most because of the lockdowns, and they suffered most. But this is quite interesting. I'm not sure I agree that the most benefits are on efficiency. So what I'd like to do is to have a round table. So I would like to ask our speakers what they think of this. And I will put first on the hot seat Sergio Guzmeroli. What do you think of are the benefits mostly on the efficiency side or not? What do you think?
I would say no. So I would say, to me, new business models are the real most important benefit, especially for the manufacturing industry, because data spaces and data sharing are allowing new business models. And so to go to insist too much about efficiency, maybe it is the wrong way to do it. And we really need to change the mindset of our companies. And large companies already understood very well, for instance, the importance of servitization, of product service systems. And you see some large companies, for instance, in the aeronautics, a company which is here in Lombardia is doing 48% of their revenues with the post-sales services. And they are selling helicopters, so they are not selling peanuts. Or other companies like in the elevator business, 80% is maintenance. And so large companies already understood quite well this, and you have also the example of car sharing. So yeah. All the car manufacturer which are in the service provision as well. SMEs did not understand this.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Vittorio, what do you think?
Well, I partially agree with the result of the poll. I think that it's also related to the current period, and also to the acronym that you said at the beginning, because in this time of uncertainty and so on and so forth, probably cost optimization is much easier to assess, and therefore, as let's say, a bit more certain result is the main focus of innovation, even though probably the real innovation is more aligned with what Sergio said, so new business models. And regarding the second result of the poll, I'm unhappy that finance received the zero votes, because I believe that also from the graphs that I showed, that finance, and especially the fintech sector, is experiencing a lot of changes, a lot of disrupting changes, a lot of new business models that are really creating impact on the sector. So even though I believe that healthcare probably will be the one that will face the most innovations, I think that also the finance sector will have a lot of them. Thank you.
I can agree with you, even though when you say that fintech will count for less than 1% even in 2030, it seems little for something that should be disruptive. So 1% in 2030, come on, there must be some, you know, I suppose maybe it will be more. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's 1% out of the financial sector. The financial
sector
is too huge. It's too huge. So
I know. But disruption means that it must affect the most organizations. Anyway, perhaps it doesn't count internal innovation within a traditional organizations.
Yeah.
Yves, would you want to say something too about this? What's your opinion from the policymaker point of view?
Yes, I think in terms of impact, we need to make the difference indeed between what Sergio already mentioned, which is the difference between the short term and the long term. So short term, indeed, we are going for the low hanging fruit, and indeed the low hanging fruit are optimization, and it is making the process more efficient, because that's also the way of least resistance for the adoption of the technologies. And that's also what we are willing to do with the Digital Europe program. I would like to come back to the fact that improving work condition or the condition of worker has received no marks at all. I think this is it's not to be underestimated, in the sense that workers indeed would have to be upskilled in order to work with the digital technologies, which can improve, in fact, give them quality of life. And this is something, if you hear the German unions, they are very much in favor of automation, because that can remove what they call the D-cube type of job, which is dumb, dangerous, and dirty jobs, DDD. Because that's really where you bring quality of life. But that is a process which should not be underestimated, as I said, because we need really to bring them on board and make sure that they are part of it. It's not just about technology. We really need to care and putting back the human in the center. And that's the two comments I wanted to make.
I absolutely agree. Actually, in IDC, we are seeing a lot of growth and investment and attention in all the technologies which have to do with workplace, not only automation, but also the revision of the workplace organization, and what we call augmenting humanity, which means in enhancing capacity with the help of automation, robotics, etc. There is a very interesting trend on this. We have some interesting data, and it's going to be much more visible in the next years. And of course, after the COVID-19, we will see a lot of rebalancing in terms of smart working versus remote working versus office working. There will definitely be some long-term consequences.
Yeah, indeed.
And I think this is also important in the ATI project, where we have a big analysis on the skills and how advanced skills mix is changing. I would like also to complete this round with our speakers from the project. So, Sotiris, do you also want to comment on this about the benefits and the impact?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to side more with the results of the poll with respect to efficiency and cost optimization. Yes, there are a lot of overlaps in all these domains, I guess. So there is leakage between cost of effectiveness optimization and reduction of time to market or expansion of the market share. So there is some overlap. However, from what we have seen, and again, we may be biased because this is what we looked actually, we've seen all our industrial partners actually report their benefits exactly there. So our empirical evidence shows that that's where most of the impact was. Now, having said that, we also saw those side effects I mentioned towards customer satisfaction, for example, because we had for example, Telefonica do analysis on customer data and calls, and they were able to rank who was satisfied and who wasn't, and that sort of fell into the pot of customer satisfaction. So is it really optimization and cost optimization and efficient operations, or is it customer satisfaction? Again, this is a discussion, so that's why I'm bringing up these various points. The other comment I would like to make is about the domains where we saw the disruption. And yes, I'm going to also back Vittoria here with the financial sector. It's a shame that no one sort of took notice in this poll because our experience with CaixaBank and what they're reporting back to us is that they are seeing great benefits when they started using these technologies that we built, and when they got their various teams within CaixaBank to utilize the tools. So they saw immediate benefit to all these things. It's hard to quantify, however, so this is just some anecdotal evidence from my end. So Vittoria, I'm with you on this one. So these are my two main comments about the polls. I have one comment about the first part of the discussion about edge and what Dragana talked about in edge processing. This ties in very well with what Eve said. We are seeing this migration, this pushback back to the edge. So this is evident, and we should really focus there, not just in terms of data processing speeds and all that, but also in terms of security and how do you secure the edge to do processing on data that's often very sensitive. So I jumped back to the initial part of the discussion, so apologies for this.
No, thanks. I think it's absolutely right. And well, this was an instant poll exactly to stimulate discussion. So by definition, it's not balanced in order to reflect everything, but actually stimulating. So we only have a couple of minutes, but I would like also Chiara and Dragana to say very, very quickly, please, your opinion about this discussion on impacts and benefits, please.
Hello. So very quickly, I fully resonated regarding the first poll to what Eve was saying. So we should differentiate between the short-term and long-term goals. And workforce satisfaction is definitely very, very important, but it requires some technologies to be developed and further pushed in those technologies like NLP and hybrid AI, hybrid decision making, and so on. I think the example that we gave for Marvel also is aligned well with this, with command room in Municipality of Trento and hundreds of camera streams arriving there every second. Regarding the second poll, I would perhaps pick government and education. And the public sector data there's lots of data in public sector, but lots of those data contains personal information, and it's very difficult. And as we realized in Marvel, to extract value from this data, without sacrificing personal information and sensitivity of the data. So I think development of technology like federated learning that was mentioned earlier, very important with Marvel as well, which lets you keep the data private, local, without necessarily augmenting data sets and exposing the data to further risks. Also edge-based processing, which can facilitate data collection through mobile phones and allow the democratization of AI. That's also very important, I think, in this domain. So quickly from my side, thank you.
Oops, I was muted. Thank you. Chiara, go ahead.
I would like to comment only the second part in order to be quicker. And I'm happy that the healthcare won the poll. And I would like to comment this, making an example that I take from the second use case of Musketeer project. In fact, some Greek hospitals want to collaborate, building a better algorithm able to detect in the early stages from some images the presence or not of a prostatic cancer. You would agree with me that everybody would be happy of having a model with the highest precision possible. So the actual obstacle is that those images are personal data. And so they have to be, they cannot leave the hospitals close to the GDPR, but with federated machine learning solution, it is not necessary that they leave the hospital because it is the model that it is locally trained there. So in the healthcare, I see important innovation like this that can take hold.
Chiara, thank you. Very good idea to show an example, and we can see that federated and edge are the keywords going forward. Alessandra, are there any questions from the audience?
No, I don't see any questions.
If anybody wants to ask, now is the moment. Because otherwise, I just wish to thank you, everybody, all the speakers, and for their really participation and this interesting presentation and discussion. And thank you on the name also of the ATI project, which is still working and will use some of what you said to improve our analysis. Marta, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Gabriela. Yes, I just want to thank all the participants because I believe it's been a very fruitful conversation and discussion between all the participants. And I just want to pick up something that Yves was saying, which I believe it's very, very important, especially for the European Commission policies, which is that the new technologies, the adoption of new technologies should also be in line with the ethics. So we have ethical guidelines, and first it's the human-centric approach, and then the technologies. And I believe that data plays a very, very key role for our industry, for our society, for our economy, but the humans should be at the center of the core. So just my final words, and to thank all the participants for being here today.
Yes, I agree with Marta, and I thank you all. Thank you. Show yourself, so we can also all say goodbye. And thank you for all participants for their patience.